If you're like me, you like playing the video games that you grew up with. Maybe you just have that old NES laying around, or maybe you have a full fleet of working consoles. Gaming on retro consoles is pretty easy. You just pick your console of choice, hook it up to the TV, and you're good to relive the gaming days of yesteryear. PC gaming, on the other hand, well, that's where it gets tricky. If you've ever tried to play a PC game made before the Xbox 360 era on a modern PC, you'll know what I mean. Assuming that you can even get the game to run, you'll run into a ton of other issues that just frustrate the player, ranging from slight issues such as the resolution not scaling properly, all the way to game speed being tied to the clock speed of your processor, which leads to the game playing a lot faster than intended or not working at all. Sure, you can fix these issues on your own, but a lot of times the tweaks required to get the game to run properly aren't worth the time when you could just be playing the console port instead. PC gaming really does suffer tremendously from these issues, and a lot of games that are exclusive to the PC are only reserved to those willing to build period-accurate computers to play them the way that they were meant to be played. And if you don't want the bulk and heat of multiple PCs in your room, well, you're in luck, because Ziggurat Entertainment, a company that has been scooping up defunct video game IPs, has been taking these games and getting them to play seamlessly on modern hardware, and the games that we are going to be talking about today are Bloodrayne 1 and 2. The first Bloodrayne was released in October of 2002, with the second game coming out almost 2 years to the day in 2004. Both games were developed by Terminal Reality and published by Majesco. It's worth mentioning that the one thing about early 2000s gaming is that a lot of popular games were targeted towards young males. Yes, I am aware that women played games during that time too, but marketing execs had a different idea of who was actually gaming and buying games back then. And the Bloodrayne series took full advantage of that targeted marketing. Now, I'm not saying that Bloodrayne is the first game to use sexuality to attract young male gamers. I mean, Miss Pac-Man is pretty hot, but Bloodrayne definitely played into it from the cover art to the advertisements, and it was pretty clear who Bloodrayne was for. Rain, the main character of the game, is even the first video game character to appear topless in Playboy magazine. The game itself isn't as sexual as the ads would have you believe, but you do have skimpy dresses and the classic Jello Jiggler's boob physics. But the real draw of the game was the campy, bloody violence complete with dismemberments, which actually was a feature a lot of people wanted in their game. Now, I haven't played these games since they came out, and I hadn't really given it much thought until now, because I was approached by Uber strategists to review Bloodrayne 1 and 2 Terminal Cut, so thanks to them for sending me some review keys my way. The Terminal Cuts for Bloodrayne are not remasters. In fact, the game plays just like it did when it was first released, but the Terminal Cut is important because it adds support for 4K resolution, updated CGI trailers, engine updates to support uncompressed textures, along with better water, fog, and shadow effects, and better compatibility with Windows 10. And I'm pleased to say that both Bloodrayne 1 and 2 run with no issues. I ran it on 3 varying computers of different graphical capabilities: my main desktop with a GTX 970, my Razer Blade laptop with a GTX 1060, and of course the Atari VCS with the Vega 3 integrated graphics. All were able to handle 4K with frame rates in between 30 and 60 FPS maximum. I do have a monitor with variable refresh rate, so the dips weren't as noticeable. The only issue that I did run into initially was with my laptop. Sometimes games will choose to run on the Intel integrated graphics, and that had a lot of slowdown at maximum settings. So if you have that specific graphic capability, I think with a little bit of tinkering you can get it to run just as good. I mean, these are PlayStation 2 era games after all. As for the game itself, Bloodrayne offers some interesting gameplay features. You have two primary combat options. You have these blades for close melee combat and guns for range combat. If you get low on health, you can jump on a humanoid enemy to feed on them, and while doing so, you can also rotate them around to use them as shields while other enemies shoot at you. You also have a ranged weapon in the form of a harpoon that can bring enemies closer, and defeating enemies builds up a meter that when it fills up, it unleashes the Blood Rage, which in the first game increases the damage and speed of the attacks. Rain can still be killed during the Blood Rage, but while in this state you can perform combos which increase damage with each level. In the second game, you're actually immune to all attacks, but any hit will decrease the length of the Blood Rage. If you're stuck and not sure where to go in each level, there is an aura mode that allows you to see enemies behind walls and the specific waypoint in the form of a light blue blob, at least in the first game. The second game, this is replaced by a Bloodrayne symbol. There are a lot more combat features as the game progresses that increases Rain's powers and makes progressing the game a lot easier. That being said, the Bloodrayne games suffer from features that were commonplace and accepted when they were new, but just infuriating to deal with today that I wish really was fixed with the terminal cut. One of these ancient features is adjusting the graphics. You do have to choose the graphics before you enter the game, and if you want to change them, then you need to exit the game completely and then start over. Luckily, my PC can handle max settings, so tweaking them wasn't really necessary. Another feature stuck in the past is controller support. While the terminal cut will support modern controllers like the Xbox One controller, the game still interprets the controller as a generic gamepad, which means that it does take a little bit to figure out what button does what, because the controller settings don't give you that Xbox controller graphic with a layout of buttons, and instead it's a menu option that says B1, B2, etc. And the games themselves kinda are a product of their time as well. The levels are pretty expansive, but the amount of assets available in the game make them feel empty. While Bloodrayne 2 improves on this, the enemies are still very generic, and you can encounter several of the same enemies in the same battle sequence, and some of the objectives are generic as well. Go from point A to B, kill boss, rinse, and repeat. There is some platforming that does break things up a bit, but that also does get repetitive after a while. The combat also feels very floaty, where you have to kind of trust that your hits are landing. Despite Rain's superior power, a lot of enemies seem to absorb hits even with the Blood Rage engaged. While you can lock onto enemies, it is still possible to throw attacks in direction that you didn't intend to. There's a part in Bloodrayne 2 where you have to throw enemies into a fireplace, and it took a while to get in a position where I could do that consistently. Both games garnered a mediocre critical reception when they were released, which is probably why we didn't see another game until 2011, which is actually a side-scrolling platform game instead of a third-person shooter. But we did get 3 Juve Bowl movies, so take that for what you will. Hopefully there is a renewed interest in the Bloodrayne franchise, and it will prompt more additions or at least a next-gen remaster. But for now, Bloodrayne 1 and 2 Terminal Cut will hold you over. For $15 each, you're getting a pretty good value, even more so when they go on sale. While I was writing this review, I did see them on sale for $10, and if you happen to have purchased the game before the Terminal Cut was released, you can upgrade for free. So there's Bloodrayne 1 and 2 Terminal Cut, games that are still worth revisiting today. Let me know if you plan on picking these games up, or if you would like to see remasters of these games. If you like this video, give it a like and share it with those who might find it interesting. And if you're new here, consider subscribing for future content. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at SnickTendo. Thanks so much for watching. I'm Super Nintendo, and I'll see you next time.